Hello, class. Okay, today I'm going to talk about change and capabilities. Okay, we have discussed what is dynamic capabilities, and dynamic capabilities, in fact, happens, yeah, and it is more pertinent in dynamic environment. So change is something that happens eventually in dynamic environments. Okay, let's look about change and capabilities. Now, firms, basically, they are required to respond to significant internal as well as external challenges, which can occur simultaneously. So you have studied about pastel. Okay, there are many factors, yeah, external factors that affect businesses. Okay, and any changes in the external factors requires the companies or the firms to adapt to those changes. Okay, and not only that, external challenges, yeah, make companies or make firms need to adapt and make changes and modification to their routines, but internal changes also sometimes can lead to internal changes in terms of factors would also lead to the requirements of changing the organization to change. All right. So there are two types of change. First is the rapid and sudden change. So these can also be known as revolutions or radical change, and continuous change. And this occurs through time, where we call it as adaptive change. Okay. Between these two, okay, they are the there are pro and cons between these two, and it can happen in different situations. For example, rapid and sudden change can happen when there are totally a shakeout in the environment. For example, the pandemic. Okay, that requires organization to have a rapid and sudden change. They need to change the business model. They need to change how they operate, and they also sometimes need to think of diversification, going to another type of business if the industry is very badly affected by the changes in the external factors. Okay. However, continuous change is more incremental. Okay. So the organization can start uh, explore and also try to forecast, the changes in the environment based on signals and also symptoms, in the environment. And then from there, they can start making strategies to adapt to those changes. So you have to predict what will happen in the future. So change capability basically is the ability of an organization to plan, design, and implement all types of change efficiently with committed stakeholders, causing minimal negative impacts on people and operations, so that desired business and cultural results from change are consistently achieved and integrated seamlessly into operations to deliver maximum return on investment. Okay, so change need to be managed. Okay, and definitely the change would not only happen to the organization, it will also be affecting the stakeholders. For example, the suppliers, the employees, okay, the shareholders. So the challenge to organization is trying to minimize, the negative impacts of change. Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, when change happen, then there's possibility that resistance would also uh, persist, yeah, in the organization. And in order to reduce the resistance, so we have to, the organization or the management, the top management or the leader themselves need to ensure that efforts are being done to minimize the negative impacts. Yeah. So basically, but change would definitely, yeah, definitely affect all parties in the business. Okay, so if we look in terms of three levels of participants in an organization, for example, leader, yeah. So the leader need to motivate the change. Okay, so and of course you can expect resistance, but it is the role of the leader to motivate the change. So there are different leadership styles that can be used, in order to persuade yeah, the organization or the participants of the organization, meaning the employees, the stakeholders, and also other parties related to the organization to change. Okay, so they need to motivate the change. Okay, and basically change shouldn't be abrupt. So you need to plan and design, yeah, the action plan in order for you to ensure that change happens with accepted. Yeah, change happen and it is accepted, and also we want to minimize the impacts. Yeah, so that there will be less resistance. Okay, and the leader also need a change mindset. They cannot ask people to change, but they are very traditional and also reluctant to change. Okay, or in another sense is that other companies within the industry are changing, but you decided to stay status quo. So this is something that need to be done. Okay, so the leaders need to lead the change. Okay, and in order for change to happen, they also need to identify new resources. Definitely, it requires new resources. Sometimes you need new people to come in. Sometimes you need to hire or change the training. Yeah, sometimes you need to involve new types of skills. So definitely change will require resources. Okay, and finally, the leader has to show their commitment in executing changes. Okay, in order for people to accept that change need to be embraced and need to be done, so the leaders has to show that they are committed to the change. All right. As for managers, they need to support. They need to support the change. Okay. And in many instances, they also need to sponsor the change. Meaning here is that they need to follow whatever changes that has been inspired by the management or by the leader and try to build the structure in order to support the change. Okay. And with that kind of framework, yeah, with a good framework that support change, it can facilitate at the operational level. Okay, and the task of the managers is to engage employees. Okay, definitely leaders would not be able to be at the ground level to get the employees to stand together with the change, but definitely managers has a bigger role in engaging the employees to support the change and also to initiate the changes. Okay, and in some instances managers also need to empower. Yeah, they need to empower the employees in order to bring the changes. So it's not the strategy is not to direct, but it's more to give or to share the responsibilities with the employees. Okay, and finally, on the part of the employees, they need to build knowledge and skills. As I mentioned just now, when change happens, it always requires new resources. And one of it is meaning that one of the resources that need to be instilled are skills. Okay, definitely skills need to be changed. For example, if you're talking about digitally led changes, okay, so it requires digital skills, yeah, among the employees in order for them to absorb the change or to adapt to the change. Okay, so the employees also must have skills learning and unlearning as well. So they need to learn to adapt and also need to unlearn those skills or those those knowledge that are not relevant anymore. So they need to revive their knowledge, okay, and rejuvenate their skills in order for them to adapt to the changes. Okay, and they also need to feel relatedness to the change. Okay, because you have to the employees need to agree to the changes. Okay, so it cannot be an instruction, it cannot be a direct order by the management, but the employees has to feel the change and they are open or they understand the importance of changing. Okay, and for that, they also need to be flexible in order for them to adapt to changes. Okay, we will look at what are the organizational capabilities basically in relation to change. Okay, so what are the impact of organizational capabilities? Basically, organizational capabilities will lead to strategy, and strategy will lead to results. Okay, so organizational capability in the forms of organizational culture, leadership performance, and also strategic drive or strategic convergence of all the stakeholders in the organization would lead would also require would lead to strategy. Okay, and in terms of the strategy must be clear, a clear strategy formulation and understanding, and then we go to the strategy implementation. And when you have strategy, definitely you have to change, and therefore you need to build the platform, yeah, in terms of change readiness. Okay, and with this put in place, then you will get the results, and the results would be you will gain competitive advantage, will gain better business performance as a result of adapting to change. So basically, the idea of organizational capabilities in relation to change is to gain competitive advantage. Remember when I explained earlier on about competitive parity, competitive advantage, you know, the VRIO, um, VRIO template, yeah. So you will see that resource, yeah, it doesn't maintain, yeah, its thickness, or it doesn't maintain its advantage, because resources would also be diluted or be obsolete with change. Okay, so sometimes for organization, they have to, in order for them to stay competitive, so they always need to manage the resources and information effectively. Okay, and they always need to revise or to revive their resources in order to be adaptive to change. All right. So adapting to change, meaning that organization makes effort to align with employees, customers, and emerging trends and markets, and can better foresee and plan for the new direction it must take. Okay, and with this, then they can drive the business performance, investing in the development of organizational capabilities, hones a company's strengths and identity, and harnessing this intangible value promotes stability and makes and makes the most of what everyone has to offer. So basically, when you the idea of organizational capabilities is to gain competitive advantage, in which competitive advantage need to be revised due to changes in the environment, and therefore the organization need to adapt. Yeah, when they want to revise their competitive advantage, definitely there are also initiatives that requires change, so they need to adapt to change, and with this, then only they can sustain their business performance or even make their business performance better. All right. So there are different types of organizational capabilities. Yeah, we can look at in terms of operational capabilities, strategic capabilities, dynamic capabilities, and contextual capabilities. Okay, in terms of operational capabilities, basically, operational capabilities reflects a company's ability to align skills, routines, and processes to successfully operate in specific market and meets its stakeholders' requirements. So basically, this is related to the operations of the organization. So basically, sometimes you need to advance the skills, or you need to revise the skills that you have, yeah, in order to make operations more effective. And then you have strategic capabilities. Okay, these are connected to strategy and vision and indicate how well an organization handles its business environment and sets itself apart. So strategic capabilities are what take an idea to a successful reality. Yeah, what it takes, yeah, an idea to a successful reality. So basically, when we talk about strategic capabilities, this is where you need to merge, you know, changes that happens in the environment to the strength and weaknesses of the organization. So they need to foresee or need to predict, you know, the changes, and from there they analyze and find what are the opportunities and or what are the challenges that the changes brings. Okay, and from there they need to adapt. Okay, adapt and the adaptation is required because we know that when changes happen in the environment, it also affects our competitive advantage. So you don't want your competitive advantage to be diluted or to become obsolete. So you need to make changes, and these changes need to be designed at a strategic level. And then finally is dynamic capabilities. Okay, this basically is focused on the changing business environment. Here, what the company need to do is building, integrating, and reconfiguring its competencies. Basically, when you are able to integrate, the resources and reconfigure the skills and resources available in the firm. So this is something that cannot be copied by another firm. So this can bring dynamic capabilities to the organization. And finally is context capabilities, whereby these are found in the functions that are essential for getting things done, but are more behind the scenes. So these might be at the lower level. So they are more apparent when they don't work well, but when it works well, you cannot see it. Yeah. All right. So moving from there, okay, so what are elements of change in dynamic capabilities? Okay, so if you look in terms of from Zolo and Winter 2002, they define dynamic capabilities as a learned and stable pattern of collective activity through which the organization systematically generates and modifies its operating routines in pursuit of improved effectiveness. So basically, there are changes happen. So what you need to do is to modify your operating routines so that you can maintain or make your organization better. As for Zara 2006, they define dynamic capabilities as the ability to reconfigure a firm resources and routines in the manner and vision and deemed appropriate by its principal decision maker. And Helford, okay, focus on the capacity of an organization to purposefully create, extend, or modify its resource base. So based on these three dynamic capabilities definition, we can see that all are talking about adaptation. Okay, adaptation to changes externally. So you need to change internally, and the changes in the at the internal level need to requires you to reconfigure the resources and routines that has been exploited before this. Okay, so you have to be innovative in terms of finding new ways of using your resources, and also sometimes you also need to add more resources, in order for you to come up with a better strategy in terms of adapting to the changes in the external environment. Okay, so according to this, there are three fundamental capability. Okay, the first one is the capacity to sense and shape opportunities and threats. Second, capacity to seize opportunities. And third, capacity to maintain competitiveness. And this competitiveness can be achieved through enhancing, combining, protecting, and when necessary, reconfiguring the business enterprise intangible and tangible assets. So in a nutshell, all are talking about the ability to predict, to see the trends, to see the changes that are coming in the environment, and then the ability to identify where the company can go with the changes in the environment. And finally, to ability to recombine, reconfigure of the resources that the organization have in order to seize the opportunity. Okay, so there are three levels of capability. The first one is first order capabilities, talking about resources and operating routine. And then you move upward to the second order capabilities that change the production process, scale, or the market serve. And finally, the third order capabilities facilitate the creation and modification of lower order dynamic capabilities. So in terms of dynamic capabilities, at the first level, okay, you have the resources and the operating routine. You can continue to use the resources and routine as before. However, it may not be effective when the environment change. Okay, so if the organization would move a level higher, whereby they use the capabilities to change the product or the production process in order to make themselves more efficient. Yeah. However, when more or rapid changes came into the picture, so you might need to go into a higher level capabilities, which is third order capabilities, whereby you need to create new capabilities and also modify the capabilities that you have, meaning here is the lower order dynamic capabilities, in order for you to adapt and also to be able to seize the opportunity presented by the changes in the external environment. Okay, so this is basically the model of dynamic capabilities during change. So in terms of this is basically in relation to the previous slide. So we want to see how a different order of capabilities play their role during changes. Okay, so if you look at the first order, what you do is adding, transferring, integrating, and shading, and this becomes the routine in the organization. Yeah, however, when you have changes in terms of your target or goal, so you need to orchestrate the resources or the processes that you use in order to combine the resources so that you can adapt and also face the changes in the environment. So the repeated use of 4 dynamic capabilities change the firm's resources base, and higher order capabilities create and orchestrate change towards a strategic path. Okay, and if you look at the explanation for that particular model just now. So the first level is basically adding new expertise, increase physical resources. You want to develop the intangible resources, okay? And then you also need to transfer knowledge. Yeah, you share your knowledge, okay? You also maybe need to learn and unlearn, okay? And then you need to align the knowledge that you have with the requirements of the changes, okay? And in some instances, you might also need to change the location, whether physically or virtually. Okay, and then integration. So you might also require to do resource integration and also operation alignment, and also be ready to changes. All right, and resource integration and operation alignment are both essential in recombining and restructuring the resources. All right, and finally shading. Okay, in some instances, you also might need to let go some of the old practices or traditional practices in lieu of what is changed, in lieu of what the changes in the environment. For example, you might need to restructure resources. You do outsourcing, for example, or you reduce the number of workers in order to face the changes, and elimination of unnecessary processes, as I mentioned just now. Okay, for example, as outsourcing, and also abandoning unimportant elements. Sometimes you also need to let go some of the operations or some of the products and services that are not relevant to you anymore due to the changes that happens in the external environment. Yeah. So if we apply to the conditions that happen nowadays during pandemic, so you can see that a lot of dynamic capabilities that include adding, transfer, integration, shading happens, and definitely shading can be a very apparent activities in terms of building dynamic capabilities during the pandemic. Yeah, for example, many companies you see, especially in the hospitality industry, hotel industry, airlines and whatnot, they do restructuring of resources. Okay, they eliminate the unnecessary processes that that lead to costs. Okay, that lead to unnecessary costs, yeah, fixed costs or variable costs. And then sometimes, to a certain extent, they also need to abandon certain services in order to be able to thrive during the pandemic. Okay, and finally, yeah, if you look in terms of the higher order capabilities, okay, so as I said just now, higher order goal development capabilities as an organization's ability to establish and set strategic goals that require skills in reading the external situation. Yes, so usually leaders are supposed to be responsible or supposed to be knowledgeable in reading the trends that is happening in the environment and come up with a strategic drive for the organization to pursue, yeah, with the changes that happens in the external environment. Okay, so as this requires understanding how the internal resources and capabilities may impact our work, yeah, on achieving the goal levels that are set. So when you change your goal due to the changes in the environment, so you also need to modify or do some changes to the internal resources. Okay, so this capability spans developing and setting various interrelated strategic goals required for organizational competitiveness, including performance, acquisition, and downsizing. So there are a number of strategies that organization can implement in order for them to pursue different strategic goals due to changes that happens in the environment. For example, during the pandemic, so many organizations go into defensive strategy, whereby they start to do they start to do retrenchment, okay, and then move into higher level of defensive strategy, that is what we call as what do you call it? Retrenchment, and then they divest teacher, and finally they can go for liquidation. Yeah, but for the organization to thrive, they need to do some kind of defensive strategy, and in some instances, they also need to go for diversification. They need to go to other business because the business cannot be sustained during the pandemic, especially business that related to transportation, that related to people going for traveling and whatnot. Okay, because of the lockdown and also because of the SOP, so some businesses cannot thrive during the pandemic, so they need to change. Okay, and when you talk about the change orchestration capability, this is defined as managerial ability to identify, build, and arrange a firm's resources and capabilities built on the concept of asset orchestration and resource orchestration. The word orchestration basically is the combining, all the elements. In this case, is assets and resource, and you combine it in a creative way in order for it to create new capabilities. Okay, so this capability required management to structure, bundle, and leverage the firm's dynamic capabilities. And with that, then dynamic capabilities can be enhanced during change. All right, so I guess that's all for this session. So I hope you understand what are the relationship between dynamic capabilities and change. Definitely during environmental environmental turbulence, so change is inevitable, and therefore dynamic capabilities will play its role in order to ensure that business can be sustained. With that, thank you very much, and I see you in the next session.